the mood is dark and the world is dark and our reflection and support group is dark, and we get to that moment of hope and healing at the end, and I ask, has anyone had something that they want to share? And sometimes it takes a minute. It's like, that think about like a water pump or a spigot that you got to pump for a while to like get it going again. But then once that opens, I feel a tangible shift among us. And having that lens of, hey, you're not going to find these things if you don't look for them. And I feel like, if we want to talk about culture and medicine and things that facilitate or are barriers to reflection, the pacing of it is one, but the continuous improvement, we have to make a decision that that continuous improvement also includes building on what's good and not just analyzing where we're going wrong and what's broken about our system or where we fell short in whatever metric we were trying to measure. Hello, welcome to the Integrated Care Podcast from the Collaborative Family Healthcare Association. I am the production editor, Grace Pratt, and I am joined by all of our team currently, although I keep teasing, there's somebody else we're trying to get back in. But we also have a special guest today. Long time listeners of our podcast will recognize his voice. And the amazing thing about podcasts is they live forever. So those episodes are still out there once you experience the just warmth and connection of our talk today. You should go back and listen to some of our early episodes that this person was on. I will let him introduce himself when we get to that part of the table. But we are going to start the way that we always do with our icebreaker and introductions. And little teaser for the episode, we're going to be talking about reflective practice and connection and rest in integrated care. And so it made me think, well, that made me think. Plus, guys, I have not seen the sun in over a week. It is the rainiest August that we have had in Oklahoma in a really long time. Yesterday, one of my kiddos, when it was time to leave for school, went and looked and couldn't find him. He was laying in his bed reading a book. And I was like, listen, man, you've got the right idea, but we got to get going. And so it made me think about the ways that, that we get cozier, that we find rest. And so I'm curious to hear, how have you been finding rest lately? So going around the circle here for our table, first we have Monica Harrison.
Oh man, that meant no time to really reflect on the question to answer about how we're reflecting and finding rest. Monica Harrison, licensed clinical social worker, lover of all things integrated care, clinical trainer and implementation coach at the University of Washington, as well as your fellow CFHA board member and podcaster, and a whole host of other things. My initial thought was, man, wait, I don't think I've been getting rest. So it was like a light bulb to go off for me, like, oh, wait. I'm not doing so well right now at this, right? Like taking care of me and the rest part. Not so much rest as in sleep, but like it's to me when I hear rest, I hear like slow down, like, right? Like take a beat, a pause, like the pace, like what's the pace that I'm moving at? And it's been too fast and I need to slow down. So I've not been taking rest, but now I have inventory that I need to.
Well, I appreciate you naming that. I think it's a hard time of year for a lot of us too, with it's like
Beginning of the school,
back to
like that is
school.
rolling in my brain. Yeah.
Yes. When you do get a moment to pause, what do you reach for? What's your go-to?
Ooh, usually it's reality TV. I like a good flipping of a table. Reality TV is my thing. I have though and need to finish, which is what I'm like, oh, I could pick up and finish this book. I've been reading The Anxious Generation for my preteen slash getting ready to be teenager and technology and social media and all the things around that. And so that is what I am getting ready to pick up and get back into and finish up.
Love it. Thank you for sharing. Next, we have Jen Thomas.
Hey, hi everybody. My name's Jen Thomas. I'm a family medicine and addiction medicine physician by training and medical director of IBH in Morris, Illinois, where my practice is, and also co-medical director at CFHA with my partner in crime, Laura Sideri. How do I find rest? I think my first impulse answer was like Monica, like I'm not. We're kind of 24/7, foot on the gas as a family and then just fall into bed exhausted at night. But I will say my hubby and I are having like a new found hobby of discovering TV shows. There was that period with child raising where like we were too tired to do anything at the end of the night, but now the kids are a little bit older. And somehow we figured out that Hulu and Disney are like combined. And I don't even quite know how because like you can't find all the same shows on both. I don't know. I'm tech challenged. But recently, really enjoying The Bear and just started Only Murders in the Building. And those have been really fun, just kind of unplug enjoyable things to do with my husband. So yeah, nothing cool here, just vegging out in front of the TV. If that's a good answer or not, but that's
I
what's going on here.
I think it's a relatable answer for sure. And wherever you find rest is personal to you, right? For sure,
Yep.
Kat. Next we have Naftali Serrano.
Hey everybody, Niftali Serrano. If you can roll your R's, I'm the CEO here of the Collaborative Family Healthcare Association. And by the way, that's the way I always introduce myself, doesn't matter what meeting I'm in. It's amazing the number of people that struggle with rolling their R's and do not even attempt it. So if you're out there, take a risk today, try to roll your R's. Rest, which is another R word. So I don't want to sound too hokey zenny here, but what I have been aiming for with rest, because like Monica said, when I think of rest, I'm not just thinking about like being on a beach somewhere, right? I'm thinking about, am I in a certain state? And it is very hard to be in a certain state these days. I don't know if people out there are aware of how how shitty things feel for a lot of people. So it's hard to be in that. It's hard to find that rest. And so what has been helpful for me lately has really been just finding the spaces within the spaces. That's what I call it. It's like it's just it's not trying to find rest somewhere else, right? It's like find somewhere rest outside of my job or rest outside of my launching my college age kids or rest outside of my marriage or rest out, it's finding the rest there, like right there when I'm dealing with a hard thing at work or it's just finding that space between the spaces and just sitting in that space a little bit, being more aware of where I am, and that helps to slow that feeling of rush down because I'm like, I'm in it. The stream is like going right by me. The water's just, you know, flowing and it's flowing past pretty fast, but I'm still able to find those little spaces of just being still and just letting things be, right? And I'm not good at it 100% of the time, but aiming to do that feels a little bit better than some of the other things I might do that don't feel as helpful, like trying desperately to plan my new vacation when I when I just finished a vacation.
When you talk about sustainability, and that's one thing I emphasize to our residents a lot, which maybe this is a spoiler alert for later in our conversation, but it can't be that you save up all of your rest for when you get a week vacation, because how often does that happen? So it is, we've got to find these little moments, these pockets of connection and grounding and all of those things. And I have to say, I get also because I may not get a chance to say it later. My favorite mindfulness fact, and you weren't exactly talking about it, but you said, I don't know that I'm that good at it. But my favorite mindfulness fact is that I think a lot of us think that when we're meditating or relaxing, it's the time that like we're totally blank and our mind is zen that we're getting the benefit. But when they've done like fMRI studies and looked at brain studies, it's actually when your attention wanders and you bring it back and your wanders and it bring it back. And it's the bringing it back over and over where we experience the benefit and growth from that like mindful meditation. And so that's my favorite thing because if you feel like you're really bad at it because you're getting really distracted, actually you're giving yourself the most opportunities to get the benefit. So just a little tidbit to file in your back pocket if you ever feel like you're bad at meditation and mindfulness. Next, we have Bridget Beachy.
Yeah, I'm Bridget. I'm a BHC in Washington State and do a bunch of other things, as most folks on here do. And yeah, I think that the biggest aha moment for me was, and we've talked about it before, and I can't remember, but I did away with all caffeine and all alcohol. So I quit alcohol January 1st of this year, and then caffeine at the end of February. And it has been a game changer in terms of how I internally feel with the rest. And even though I didn't have a lot of caffeine, and I don't really feel like I had much that, going from 4 drinks a week to no drinks or having 80 milligrams of caffeine a day to none, for me is a huge difference and has made a huge contribution to kind of feeling just better and more grounded. And I think it might be a little bit of a mini midlife crisis. I'm like, this is how a BHC has a midlife crisis because I'm turning 40 in 3 weeks. And so I'm like, I've been thinking about this ever since I turned 39. I'm like, I got to figure something out with my life. And only a BHC can have a midlife crisis and like do it this way, instead of going and buying something or making some poor decisions, we quit everything that is a vice. I don't know.
The opposite
That's so
midlife
awesome.
crisis.
That's so awesome. So you, Bridget, you have a birthday in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
What's
September
your date?
19th.
Another September. Yes, I'm the 15th.
Ah.
And I'm turning 50. So
Oh,
I'm sort of
Big
past my midlife
landmark.
crisis. It's like, yeah.
Will we be singing happy birthday to you at CFHA?
It's a landmark year. I'm 40 in December this year, so lots of
Oh, look
on
at
the
y'all
clock
young folks.
here.
Oh,
I think too, again, like just that idea, Bridget, of like when you quit things and then feeling the difference and like giving that takes a pause too, to give yourself a moment to notice like how does that feel and the difference it's making. So that's
yeah.
awesome.
And the alcohol was like immediate. It was probably within like 2 to 3 weeks. I was like, oh man, I feel good. The caffeine was the one that felt terrible for that like 2 weeks, and then probably felt terrible for another 2 to 4 weeks. So it was probably like a 6 week span.
Mhm.
But once that 6 weeks happened, it's like I can concentrate for hours, and
Mhm.
I don't need anything. And before, I did so.
Mhm. Yeah,
But it took 6 weeks to get to that point.
it's a
So for
long
anybody
washout
who's,
period. Yeah.
yeah, it took way longer to get the benefits of that because I'm like, where's the benefits? I feel terrible, but they're there.
Yeah, awesome for hanging in. And then we have our very special guest returning to the podcast. I will let him introduce himself. We have Jeffrey Ring.
Thank you so much, Grace. I'm so happy to be back with all of you. This is a really remarkable and wonderful space. I feel it immediately. The warmth, the camaraderie, the smarts, the deep reflection as we're talking more about today. It feels really like coming home. So thank you for having me. Jeff Ring here in Los Angeles. I'm a health psychologist and a leadership coach and educator. And I'm a champion for health equity and health justice. I help leaders be better leaders in all ways, but better leaders in courageously dismantling racism and sexism and heterosexism in medical education and in medical care delivery, even how they run their own institutions and teams and meetings and so forth. So happy to be here. In terms of the prompt, it's a little counterintuitive, but I feel most rested when I'm swimming, oddly. I'm a Pisces, I'm a March fish, and that's my place. And so when I'm in the pool, like I just something happens, an inner transformation or something. So anyway, that's my happy place. And then after swimming, whoa, I just feel so good for the rest of the day. So anyway, yeah.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, Jeff, and thank you for spending this hour with us and coming back and lending your voice and your thoughts. I am, like I said at the top of the show, I'm Grace Pratt. I am the behavioral medicine faculty at Integris Great Plains Family Medicine Residency Program in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And I have been finding rest in going for walks. My neighborhood has nice sidewalks. The weather's been unseasonably cool for August, even before all of the rain started. Usually in August, we're still around like 110, 112. It's some hot days, but it's been actually really lovely. And so just going for walks around our neighborhood after dinner with my kids or in the morning whenever I can get outside. And also, I got a porch swing for Christmas from my dad this year, and sitting out on my front porch and just watching the neighborhood has been really restful for me too. So just that time outside, man, that makes a difference for me. Well, I am so happy to have everyone here, and we're going to talk about reflective practice. But I'm wondering, Naftali, do we have any news and notes?
Yeah, there's always stuff going on at the Collaborative Family Healthcare Association, the Integrated Care Association, but I'll just focus on a couple here. So one is, of course, if you're listening to this podcast semi-real time from when it was published, the annual conference is coming up in Raleigh, North Carolina this October. If you want to learn more about the conference, go to integratedcareconference.com and find out all the information. The thing that I'll tell you about this year's conference is, number one, I hope I don't jinx it, but like we're on pace to potentially have the largest conference we've ever had, which is incredibly counterintuitive to what we expected, given all of the financial pressures that our communities, healthcare communities are under due to federal actions. And so I hope that that's reflective of a hunger for coming together, a hunger for resistance, active resistance, a hunger for making the world a better place where you are, and ultimately, hopefully, a passion for integrated care and making healthcare teams just great. So it's going to be an awesome event. That does mean that there are also many more difficult choices for attendees to make. So we have many more actually concurrent sessions happening at the same time. So we know we're going to get complaints. There's too much going on to choose from at the same time. Yes, that's just the virtue of like what the nature of the beast is you kind of get more people wanting to come and present. So going to be a lot of fun. Please be there if you can. It's a really great place. You can get there by Amtrak. Plane is pretty easy. If you're up and on the East Coast, getting there is pretty easy on 95 as well. And if you're on the West Coast like Jeff, try to just buy the bullet and make the long flight. So yeah, and then the last thing here I'll say is I'm just going to tease right at the end of our conversation here. I'm going to talk a little bit about an editorial by the editors of the peer-reviewed journal that CFHA sponsors called Family Systems in Health. And they're embarking on a journey with that journal that I think is really fabulous. And so I want to talk a little bit about that at the end. And then we're going to have a little fun with an AI podcast that our podcast team is concerned will replace them. But I've assured them that there's no one that can duplicate the crazy that is in this room, and certainly not an AI podcast. So we're just gonna have a little fun with some snippets of an AI version of that podcast. So tease that. That's at the end of our podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit to get into our main show topic, thinking about reflective practice. And I'm imagining that we may have some listeners that are being like, how does that work for integrated care or for medicine? Or, because all we talk about is the fast pace of healthcare and the number of patients in clinic and the pressure from our systems to move through things. But then there is this competing pulling pressure that we feel, I think, to be connected, to be that human, presence, and that, coming into contact with people's suffering and experience in that sacred space that we create in the work that we do, that it feels competing or feels really disparate to me, and I think for a lot of people. So I wonder, as we're starting our conversation, Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about kind of your history with reflective practice and why this is important to you?
Yes, and I'm so happy that we're talking about it. I think that reflective practice is one of those things that can easily get lost. It can easily fall to the side. Maybe we haven't even really been exposed to it or been sort of prepared or trained or practiced with it. And I think there's a lot missed when it's not a regular ritualistic or rhythmic part of our work. So phenomenologically, my first exposure to the idea was I attended a presentation by the great psychologist, Jungian psychologist James Hillman, and he was talking about how do we find meaning in life, in our existence. And he said that we have experiences, and experiences are just experiences. They are not yet meaning unless we have woven in some reflection, right? So the chemical formula is an experience plus reflection is meaning. Without reflection, it's just another experience. So that has set me off, certainly for a long time, thinking about this phenomenon of reflection and what it means and what it looks like. And then, we can talk a little bit about this as well, but certainly in the space of education and medical education in particular, in healthcare and in healthcare practice, what is the role of reflection and how does it sustain us? How is it connected to quality improvement? How is it connected to finding meaning in our work?
I wonder, we have a nice, I think, really different collection of experiences here on our panel of podcasters in terms of like on the ground practice and also consulting and work at an administration level and Jen's physician experience as a physician. And I'm wondering, like, what does this look like for you? Have you been in a system, any of us, that seems like it supports this well? Or have you known any clinicians or colleagues or peers that it feels like do this well? And how are you experiencing reflective practice?
Yeah, I'll jump in by saying the first thing that came to mind, Jeff, when you were talking, and it is really so nice to hear your voice. It just something sweet fills my brain when I hear you talk. I hadn't thought about it this way before, but we're the organization that promotes team-based care, right? We're the organization that promotes this idea that we do better caring for other human beings when we create a community of professionals around them that join with them towards this goal of living a more value-filled, healthy existence, right? And I never thought of the idea that actually what you're doing when you bring people together is you're creating opportunities for reflection. Because that's what happens like in the precepting room when I'm there and I'm hearing residents tell their story of their experience with their patient to their preceptor, and I'm sitting there, and then I get an opportunity to ask questions or reflect or just say, give my perspective on their story or just sort of like give them feedback about what their experience was like. Like we're all together, just reflecting together is what that is. And I think for those of us who've been on really good teams, it seems to me that reflection is sort of an intuitive attribute of that kind of a team. And I never thought about that specific attribute as like one of the values of having that team to kind of process the experiences that we're having real time.
Yeah, I can resonate with that for sure and wholeheartedly agree, right? Like, are we taking the time to reflect on how well we listen to our colleagues, right? Could be from different disciplines, of course, but still our colleagues that are a part of that team. Do we value their input, what they're bringing to the table? Did I maybe communicate my role and my intentions well enough, right? Like that takes time for you to slow down enough to reflect on that and then put that meaning to it, like what Jeff was saying, right? Because then that's what's going to drive whatever change you may feel like needs to happen next after that. I think that most of us are accustomed to doing that for our patients because we want to make sure we're reflecting and bringing in our patients' cultural values, right? Like when we talk about doing it for our patients, people are like, yeah, absolutely. But we don't always stop to think about that importance of doing it with each other as a team, as a collective, as a unit. So yeah, I resonate with that.
And specific to, I was thinking about as you're talking, Monica, about, sometimes I worry, say in a particular COCM implementation, and you've got a care manager maybe operating in a siloed fashion or maybe even remote, and they're seeing, hearing, and having these experiences over and over again throughout their week, but they don't have an opportunity to reflect, right? Like who's doing that reflecting with them? Like hopefully they have a good consulting psychiatrist they work with. It's a good partner, and they do some of that together. But in any case where a team member is sort of siloed out like that, I worry about them intuitively. And again, I've never framed it the way that, Jeff is sort of introducing it today to us in terms of time for reflection. But like, I think that's what I worry about. I worry like, is this person's going to get saddled with all these experiences without any opportunity to reflect? What happens at that point to you as a human being, right?
Yeah, Neftali, I think it's very interesting that you said about being intuitive, that I know that some of the days where I'm seeing patients back to back running from visit to visit, whenever there's a break, I don't sit there and do my notes. I'm like, and immediately need to connect with somebody on the team, whether that's cracking a joke with an MA or just checking in on a PCP or seeing what the other BHCs are doing. It's almost like, yeah, I don't know what I would do without having those little mini recharges of just, like I said, cracking a joke with an MA as you're running through the clinic. So yeah, that is something. And that's why, Neftali, I saw your video on about the importance of team and being together. And that's why, when COVID did happen, I was like, we absolutely are not going home. And now we do offer virtual visits, but it's only if you're at the clinic. So we can do phone calls, but all of our BHCs have to come into the clinic and never went home during COVID. And I know that there's pros and cons to everything, but for me, it was never an option. We had to be here fully and completely for the whole team experience. Because like you said, it is the secret sauce of integrated care.
Which kind of makes me think, Bridget, of the other question that Grace had asked in terms of like if we know of people or teams who are doing it really well. Like I know there are a lot of virtual teams. Like this is where like we already were doing it, but now after COVID, it's like skyrocketed, right? So we know there are already virtual teams, and that would be something I would hope as a leader, if I was, leading a virtual team, that I would
Yeah.
factor in spaces and time for that connection for us to reflect, like, right, like even if they're here's the three, it's going to be these same three questions Monica gonna ask us every time, right? But like everyone is aware, like, okay, that's what we're doing, we're being intentional about it. It's that opportunity for us to slow down. It's not about how many visits have you seen, how many patients did you get through the door, see virtually, but like this is our opportunity to actually reflect on the work, the team, ourselves, right? But I think it would take an intentional leader building that in to still have that type of connection, what you're talking about, especially if you're on a virtual team.
Oh, Monica, I love what you're saying about that, this idea of building in a regular rhythm to reflection, a regular rituality of it, one might say. I can share with you just really briefly the work that Dr. Joe Marie Riley and I did over at White Memorial. We developed something called H&H, Healing and Hopefulness. So every month we would have M&M, right? Morbidity and mortality, a very bleak affair, an important affair. We need to look at what has gone awry and learn from that and figure out who and what may have led to that. But we felt like we needed a counter stretch, like in yoga, right? There's a forward bend and a back bend. So at the end of M&M, we added H&H, healing and hopefulness. And basically what it was just, and we called the session that M&M/H&H, right? So it was named. It was just opening the floor to two prompts. The first one was, can you share something from the last month at your work that makes you so happy, gratified in the work that you do? And or can you share a brief story about something you've witnessed in the work of colleagues that has really just so touched you in important ways? So notice these are strength-based reflection prompts. In fact, I think reflection, of course, needs to be in all ways, but these are strength-based. They were every month. The first month was quiet. The second month, crickets. By the third month, by the fourth month, stories and tears and applause and celebration and a deep connection. But then something happened that we didn't expect. Two residents in the hospital at 4 a.m., a million reasons to be unhappy and upset and grumbly and spicy. They go in to deliver some bad news to a family. They walk back into the hallway, and one resident puts his arm around the other and says, "Hey, what you just did in there, the way you facilitated that meeting, that was an H&H." It was like we had created a new lens, new glasses to look at life. We had given them a whole new way to be inviting in reflection when in the past it may not have been there. So I want to share that with you because I think that our meetings are due for makeovers. They should have a beginning, a meeting, a middle, and an end. And I think that maybe the beginning and or the end and or the middle should be an invitation for reflection, like on the agenda. So
I love that, Jeff.
how that lands with all of you, but
Yeah, it does. I'll share that. I heard you describe that probably 4 or 5 years ago at a conference. I'm sure it was an STFM, and started implementing it regularly with my residents in our monthly, we have a monthly kind of reflection and support group that I facilitate. And it's interesting the ways that residents cycle through, because every 3 years at most, you have brand new people and a whole different. And some of them I've found really latch onto that more than others. But what I have found is that for each of them, it does take, I love what you said about it took a few months to build that practice because it does take looking for it. And there are times when the mood is dark and the world is dark and our reflection and support group is dark, and we get to that moment of hope and healing at the end, and I ask, has anyone had something that they want to share? And sometimes it takes a minute. It's like, that think about like a water pump or a spigot that you got to pump for a while to like get it going again. But then once that opens, I feel a tangible shift among us. And having that lens of, hey, you're not going to find these things if you don't look for them. And I feel like, if we want to talk about culture and medicine and things that facilitate or are barriers to reflection, the pacing of it is one, but the continuous improvement, we have to make a decision that continuous improvement also includes building on what's good and not just analyzing where we're going wrong and what's broken about our system or where we fell short in whatever metric we were trying to measure. Because, I think as a whole, healthcare providers are so focused on giving good care and want to give good care and are very high functioning people. And sometimes that looks like they're trying to find all their errors so that they can get rid of them. And that focus on the perfectionism or like, sure, I had, 50 happy patients, but this one person got really, really mad at me because I missed a message in my in basket. And now that's all I can focus on. There is an intentional shift that happens from not just reflecting on what went wrong.
Yeah, I had the same reaction, Grace. I started thinking about the way we do metrics and the way we communicate metrics in meetings and thought what a counter that is to frame accountability, because that's what metrics are really about, right? They're just about accountability, but frame accountability in a relational framework, right? And not just relationship to other, but relationship to self, right? And if we I think do a better job in medicine of framing metrics in that way, we will hopefully humanize metrics and humanize the application of metrics in the context of the experiences that our teams are having. And particularly, Jen, you put in the comments that there's a lot of physicians that need something like this, need reflective practices built in, right? But feel this constant pressure of productivity and all that. So I want to make sure that our conversation doesn't take us into la la land, right? And is not sort of like there's providers out there who are listening to this and like, yeah, but, right? So I want to
So
speak to
we'll
the,
start sounding like Charlie Brown's teacher.
yeah,
They're like, oh, there they go.
Yeah,
There they
yeah,
go.
yeah. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm a bit of a yeah, but I love this. And I think that's why I know that's why I love this podcast and CFHA. You guys are so aspirational to me as a medical provider because like you have a way of looking things that like I never thought about that. I was never taught to look at things like what's restorative practice? What? What? How would we reflective? How do we look at what? I mean, I feel like it's so important, but like, how would I do that? I guess I need a one-on-one from you guys. Like, what would you suggest in a busy clinic day where I am getting the metrics of you didn't meet productivity, right? Like, how would I bake that into daily primary care and do it in a way that feels genuine and not sacrificing the bottom line that feels like we're always accountable to with visits. And just have to say, Jeff, love you. I'm a big fangirl. When I started listening to the podcast back in the day, I remember your voice distinctly. So amazing to like actually be talking to you on the podcast, kind of full circle for me. Anyway.
Well, I
Thanks,
think
Jen. I
one of
really
the
appreciate that. And I would just say that, look, I don't think we need to beat ourselves up about this, right? There's time to there's time to work and there's time to reflect. And sometimes reflection may come in after a particularly spicy patient encounter right there. Sometimes it's on the drive home, and sometimes it's just, when we meet with a colleague, in a quiet moment. So I would just invite people to find your own way in, and be creative about it, be intentional. It's linked to mindfulness, and it's certainly, I would say, linked to wellness and sustainability of being able to do this intense interpersonal work over the arc of our career. So I would be worried about a practitioner who doesn't find the time to do it somehow.
There's a lot of us, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff hit that one word that I was like, oh yeah, like what's the culture of well-being? Like what's the culture of well-being? And I am aware, I have worked in organizations where that was not the priority. Your individual well-being, that ain't it. We're trying to make numbers and, make money. I think that as an individual, you have to also create the space. So like earlier when Neftali was talking about finding the space within the space, right? Like, so your environment is not teeing you up for that, right? But you can, as an individual, you know what you need and how do you make those connections either with your colleagues, create that space for yourself. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to hear from whoever that, hey, you didn't meet this metric. Multiple things that are opposite could be true at the same time. I could have not met that metric, and I could have also had these types of experiences with these types of populations over here that I value and that brought some type of meaning and that has changed my practice in some type of way, right? Like multiple things that are opposite can exist at the same time. So I definitely wouldn't want any provider to like beat up on themselves over it. I mean, we're a part of a system, and the system is telling us, see the patients churn out the money. That just is, right? Like I say that just is, does not make it okay, but we are a part of the system where a lot of us are in places where well-being is not thought about. Creating environments for staff to thrive and not just be surviving is not thought about, right? And so how do we create the spaces within the spaces for ourselves to do that reflection, to connect with our colleagues and team who probably want it too, right? So if I'm the person that slows down and be like, all right, Bridget, you got them running shoes on today, right? Like now we both might be like, oh yeah, because I got a lot on my schedule. Me too. Okay, let's catch up at this time, right? Like how do we slow each other down sometimes to make it okay? Because one of the things I mentioned in the chat was sometimes people don't feel like it's safe enough. Like you'll have the same feeling as someone else on your team, but maybe don't feel like it's safe enough to speak that or say it. And so sometimes someone else opens that door. You're like, oh yeah, I was thinking that same thing too.
in
Yeah, oh, go ahead, Niff.
I was just going to piggyback off of that from the standpoint. I think what Jeff said before is really important, that a lot of it's about rhythms. And so to Monica's point, I think there's individual rhythms that if you're in a bad system, right? We're assuming this is a provider, behavioral health or medical, in a system that is dysfunctional, right? And is just there's really dehumanizing. That's what we're talking about when we're a bad system, right? It's just treating human beings as widget makers as opposed to human beings, right? And so in that system, you have to accept that reality, right? As Monica said as well, you're not advocating for it or you're not condoning it, but you have to accept it, right? That's radical acceptance there. That is what is. But then I think there's certain rhythms that you can practically create, and I've been in these situations, so I'm not talking out of no experience here, where you have to figure out what are the rhythms of the day where I'm going to introduce reflection into my practice. And not just that, what I would do is say, not just how am I going to do it individually, but how could I do it with teammates in my vicinity, right? And so, like, I'm a big proponent. That's a big reason why I think huddles and pre-visit planning is really important, because that's an opportunity for reflection. You're going through the schedule that day, and that's an opportunity when you're sitting with your MA or anybody else who's part of that huddle, and you're like, yeah, Mrs. So-and-so, boy, that patient really sits heavy on my heart. That's a moment of reflection that's really important. And then other people have an opportunity to chime in, right? And maybe share a little bit of what's going on with them. That is a moment of reflective practice in just a basic, 5-10 minute huddle that you might have at the beginning of a day. And maybe at the beginning of the second half of your day after lunch, if you have the luxury of that. So I think setting those rhythms becomes a way that you own your day and say, no, I'm going to prioritize reflection as part of the work that I'm doing. And then if you can involve the team, even better.
Yeah, and I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent here, but what we're talking about has been really critical and foundational to everything that we try to do at CHCW from a PCBH standpoint, and try to do at the larger company as well. But it's a little bit easier because I have more control within the PCBH. But with our team meetings, and we've talked about them before, probably I spend 30 minutes, and when we have one of our BHCs who's very great at modeling reflective practice, lead us in reflection. We literally call it reflection time, and that's how we start off the meeting. And so it takes about 25, 30 minutes, and we goes as long as it goes. And then we move into the team metrics, where basically Dave will conjure up how many like warm handoffs we've had, how many total visits. We track it over the year, and then he ties it directly to the values that our team has espoused, such as serving the community, being there for folks that are in need, because I believe that access is quality. So to me, they're not opposing. And so we talk about how people's core values of why they work here, how it matches to the like overall group metrics. Then we move into the individual metrics for our award show, and we make them fun, we make them light, but everybody's numbers are up there because I sit on senior leadership, and I don't think it's in most cases, and I'm probably naive or maybe naive. I think it's they don't have that skill set. Their job is to keep the doors open. And we had to go through a reduction in force in which we had to eliminate 70 positions because we didn't have enough productivity. Fair, not fair. That's a horrible thing to go through. So I don't think that anybody has nefarious reasons sitting with those teammates of mine on senior leadership. They don't have the skill set to know how to talk about these things, which is why I think I'm there, is to try to help as much as possible, with that skill set. So we do our individual awards. We make them a big deal. I try to have not every award be productivity. We do teamwork makes the dream work, where our team will vote on the team member who is supporting the culture of CHCW as well as supporting the culture of PCBH. And we do things, getting your peer chart reviews done, attendance. So we do it's not just productivity, although that's a part of it. And how we end our award show is everybody turns in photos to our manager, and she puts them all into a PowerPoint. We normally have 4 slides worth of photos that people submit doing fun things with themselves and their families. And then we go through, and our manager walks us through and points to all of them, and everybody says what they did, and why they turned in that photo. And so it's an interesting mix of we have this deeply accountable metrics, productivity driven situation mixed with the humanity of why are we even here? And we celebrate people taking PTO. We celebrate people taking their rest. Sometimes during the reflection time, we talk about how are people recharging. And so it's a huge part of it is modeling and demonstrating. And then, we have our OGs who are running parts of the meeting. It's not just me and Dave. And then they're modeling. So it's not just me and Dave, although Dave is probably the best that I've seen at reflection. So between myself and between Dave being this juggernaut of reflection, and then Sarah and some of our other OGs leading the team, then everybody sees, oh, well, this is just how it's done. And then the culture continues. So I don't know. I was trying to give really practical, tangible, and then never letting a kudo die me is my other mantra. So if I'm with seeing a BHC and they said they had a good experience with the PCP, I immediately send an email to that person and I tag their boss on it. So and then that goes for MAs, anybody who says a kudo, I send it to them and I CC their boss on it. And people are like in tears from one line of saying like, hey, the patient appreciated you. And I'm like, well, that's pretty sad that that's how little of appreciation that they have. But I've been doing that now for probably 6 or 7 years. And now other people are doing that. Not saying it's just because of me, other people do it, but it, so anyways, I'm
Yeah.
gonna stop talking there, but
Yeah, no, that's so helpful. That's so helpful. I think what I'm learning from you guys is we do a little bit of that, I think, as our team is maybe we just don't call it reflection time, right? Like it's the lunchtime. It's like when we all sit together in our little lunchroom and chat about things, you know. So what advice would you give for me as a PCP who wants to be more reflective practice? Like, is it doing more of that at lunch and calling it that? Is it we are gonna huddle? We don't huddle right now. I know we should, but we don't. You know, like what's doable today that we should start doing if we wanted to actually change the culture?
I think that you, as being the position that you're in, anytime you see anything good, you call it and you name it, and
Okay.
every form that you could think of. So whether it's email, whether it's a text,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in person, whether it's a team meeting, and just kind of like Grace, and I think some others were saying, building off the strength. And so instead of focusing on the weaknesses, you just build up on all the strengths and you start that like you could start it immediately. And once your brain is primed, as we've been saying, once your brain is primed, like Jeff was saying with the H and H, and now people are like, oh, that's an H and H because their brain has
Right.
been primed for it. I
Yeah.
think that's the most immediate thing. And once you start doing it, and I know people look up to you because I know you, and you know you're a natural leader, and so I think as soon as you start doing it, they're going to start doing it. So that's my 2 cents. I'll let Jeff and
No, I love it.
my
I'm gonna give it
colleagues
a crack
pop in.
today, literally.
Yeah, I like your question and I love your response, Bridget. It's a courageous and vulnerable decision, I think, Jen, to sit in the room with colleagues and to talk about the work. But that's extraordinary role modeling. And it creates a particular climate and culture of reflection, which others can then crawl into as they're feeling ready. Some of the questions I think that can be helpful to reflect on, either with oneself or with others, are like, revisiting what happened in a particular clinician-patient encounter. What went well? What are we really pleased with? What are the things that maybe if we could redo, we would want to redo them? How do we feel in our body, right? Both how did we feel during that encounter and what clues do we gather from that? And how do we feel as we revisit it? What are some things that I might want to do different? To what degree did that encounter align with what first called me to want to be a healer, right? Am I living that out, or are there certain barriers at play here? We can do reflection sort of specifically focusing on encounters. We can get to reflection through arts and humanities, through drawing out, a particular encounter, as Dale Waxman teaches. Draw a picture of a difficult encounter that you had and then share that. Even looking at poetry and the humanities, I think, invites us into a particular reflective space. And there's like some extraordinary poetry about the clinical encounter and healthcare as well. So I would say, Jen, that there are so many on-ramps. There are so many on-ramps just waiting to be opened up. But it's up to us to decide that we're ready to, we want to run forward onto that on-ramp and swim in these waters.
So good.
It is
Thank you.
good. And that's a great way to kind of wrap up our podcast today. I'm wrapping our podcast up for Grace, who had to catch a flight. Jeff, thanks so much for just helping us do some reflection today by asking some really great questions. That's why I can tell Jeff is a really good coach. Ask some really good questions. Before we leave today, I want to just tease this and encourage you all to go out and read a editorial. And actually, in a way, it ties in somewhat to this practice because our journal, Family Systems and Health, went through an editorial shift. They change editors every 6 years. And by the way, this is a journal that's sponsored by us, but really owned by the American Psychological Association, right? So they have full editorial independence and control. We don't tell them what to do or not to do. They've been through a self-reflection process. And one of the things they're reflecting on is that they needed to update what some of the inclusion criteria for articles they would receive and accept look like because the world has changed. And as the world has changed, they're trying to keep pace with it. So I think it's a fantastic piece. The editors are C.R. Mackey and Roger Kessler, very well-known names in the world of integrated care. Fascinating gentlemen. I love meeting with them. I meet with them on a regular basis just to get updated on stuff. So the article is called Anatomy of an Article, Expanding and Improving the Integrated Care Literature. And they go through basically as they went through a reflection process, and then reflection process included talking to people in the world of integrated care, talking to people at the very beginnings of it, like CJ Peak and other folks like that, and Susan McDaniel and other people, and just doing reflection. And they came up with 6 criteria that they're going to be focusing on. And we'll put the link to the article in the show notes. So here are the criteria that they're looking for going forward. Does the article explicitly address integrated care as a focus of the project's design, implementation, evaluation, and/or implications of the findings? Second, does the article explicitly address issues related to whole health involving both medical and behavioral health care? Third, does the article explicitly focus on the systems and/or families involved in delivering integrated care? Fourth, level of integrated health practice. Does the article explicitly describe the site's level of integration using a tool accepted by the field, like the PIP, for example? Areas of focus of integrated health practice. Does the article address at least one key dimension of integrated care? And then finally, 6, elements of integrated health practice. Does the article address the core principles, processes, and structures of care delivery? And I think this is a fascinating kind of move because what it does is it tells us the field is striving for specificity, it's striving for clarity. And yeah, so take a look at that. We'll put it in the show notes. And then here at the end, here's the semi tongue-in-cheek fun part. we the editors themselves, I didn't do this, all right? So this is not me, but the editors themselves put their article into, I think it was Google Gemini, and it has a Google Notebook, I think it is actually. It has a feature where you can create a podcast out of whatever material you uploaded. So it created a AI podcast out of the material uploaded. I, more tongue-in-cheek than anything else, put it up on our team's Basecamp chat, and it elicited some pretty strong reactions, including Bridget, who had a very visceral reaction, which I totally get, right, Bridget? I mean, like, what was the word you used? I forget what you said.
I think I said
Creepy,
cringy,
creepy.
cringy, and then
Yeah.
I reflected on that I was happy I was going to be dead by
Yeah.
the time
Yeah.
the robots came for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
that
right.
gives me so much peace knowing that, like,
I think it was creepy for you. I'm dead serious here. When I listened to it, I feel like AI listened to you and Dave and all your content out there on the internet. Listen to it again. The AI voice on there sounds like Dave Bauman. That's probably why you're like, it's
Oh,
like
gosh.
my, computer generated partner. Blah. I don't know. That's probably why it hit a nerve, I would guess.
All right, so we will leave it up to you, the listeners, what your reaction is to this podcast little segment piece here. And yeah, take it or leave it. It's just for fun. So for our podcast team, for Grace, our lead podcaster, for Jeff Ring, our wonderful guest today, and podcast emeritus member, thank you so much for listening to this month's episode of the Integrated Care Podcast.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something maybe a bit niche, but really important. It's how a specific journal, Families, Systems, and Health, is actually, shaping the future of integrated healthcare, IHC, as it's often called. And this isn't just, academic navel-gazing about publishing. It's really about a whole field figuring out what it is, where its edges are, and where it's going. It's quite a fascinating look behind the scenes.
It really is. And what's so striking is how clear they're being about it. They've basically laid out a roadmap, haven't they?
A roadmap, yeah.
For anyone in integrated care, researchers, clinicians, even just readers like you, it shows what integrated really means now and sort of hints at what's coming next.
That's our mission today, is to pull out the key insights from these new guidelines they've published. What does this shift mean for healthcare? And how can we all get a better grip on what integrated care truly involves? We want to get past the jargon.
Definitely. See the why behind the what.
Okay, so let's dig into this editorial. It's by C.R. Mashi and Roger Kessler. They've obviously spent a lot of time refining the journal's scope. But why does a journal take such a strong stance in defining its field?
That's a great question. And I think, connecting it to the bigger picture, it shows how much IHC has grown up, really. Since the 90s, it's changed a lot.
Right.
So the journal is trying to consciously align itself with those changes. In healthcare, yes, but also broader societal shifts. Their big goal seems to be strengthening this shared space for thinking across disciplines, researchers, practitioners talking together and pushing to clarify definitions, focus areas, basically everything needed for IHC to really make a difference in population health, not just individual patients, but whole communities.
Okay, so it's about driving clarity and consistency for bigger impact. That makes sense. They mentioned becoming the central repository for IHC articles. How are they actually ensuring that what gets published fits this tighter focus? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, how do they operationalize that? Well, they're tweaking their editorial decision-making, and importantly, they've set up this editorial guide.
An editorial guide?
Yeah, complete with a decision tree. It sounds quite structured.
Like a flow chart for papers?
Sort of. It's meant to help everyone, authors, editors, reviewers, readers, check if an article properly hits the key parts of IHC. It's a systematic way to keep things relevant and high quality.
Okay, systematic. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, this is where I found it got really interesting. They introduced these 4 buckets of criteria. It's like different stages of development. Established, maturing, emerging, and aspirational.
That's right. It's a framework for the whole field's evolution, reflected in the journal standards.
Let's start with established criteria.
Yeah.
What are these? The real basics.
Exactly. These are the non-negotiables, things the field generally agrees on, backed by solid evidence. An article has to tick all these boxes just to get through the door for review.
All of them. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, what are these non-negotiables?
First, the article's main point, its core focus, has to be integrated care itself. Design, implementation, evaluation, implications, whatever it is, IHC has to be central. If not, rejected.
Okay. Straightforward enough.
Second, it must deal with whole health, meaning it has to involve both medical and behavioral care aspects. If it's just one or the other, again, it doesn't fit.
Right, that integrated part.
Precisely. And third, it needs to explicitly look at the systems or the families involved in delivering that integrated care, not just the individual patient in isolation.
So systems, families, whole health, and an explicit IHC focus. That's the bedrock.
That's the bedrock. Get those right, or it's not considered an IHC paper for their purposes. It's quite a clear line in the sand.
It really is. Okay, so that's established. What about the next bucket? Maturing criteria. The editorial says these aren't required yet, but will be soon. What's that about?
Yeah, this is kind of the get ready category. These are things the field needs to embrace to grow and become more, mature. There's evidence for them, but the journal recognizes it takes time for everyone to adjust to this tighter focus. So they're strongly encouraged now, required soon.
Giving people a heads up makes sense. What's in this bucket?
3 main things. First, the level of IHC practice. Articles should explicitly say how integrated the practice setting is using a recognized tool.
Oh, like those assessment tools.
Yeah.
IPA or the main one?
Exactly, like the Integrated Practice Assessment Tool, IPAT, the main Health Access Foundation tool, Practice Integration Profile, things like that. It pushes for standardized measurement, not just vague description.
Okay, quantifying integration. What else?
Second, the areas of focus. Authors are strongly encouraged to zoom in on at least one key dimension of integrated care. And they list a whole bunch of examples like implementation science, diversity, family systems stuff, geriatrics, global IHC, leadership.
Payer issues, pediatrics, policy.
Lots there. Yeah, even things like technology and workforce development. They want deeper dives into specific aspects.
Right. And the third, maturing criterion.
That's about the elements of IHC practice. So looking at the core principles, the processes, the structures of how care is actually delivered, thinking about design, development, delivery, measurement, the whole cycle.
So it's really pushing for more depth and rigor across the board, documenting the level, focusing on specific areas, and analyzing the actual practice element.
Exactly. It's signaling where the field needs to go next to solidify its practices and evidence base.
It feels like a very intentional way to guide that evolution.